Welcome to the Social Engineer Podcast, episode 230. This is the Human Element series. I am Chris Hadnaghi, CEO and founder of Social Engineer, the Innocent Lives Foundation, and the Institute for Social Engineering. And I'm joined by a really great guest today, Ryan McBeth, which we'll be talking about very shortly. Let's just get through our opening intro and announcements. So as always, this episode is sponsored by our company, Social Engineer. As you've been asking, all of our 2024 training is up on the website now. So feel free to head on over to social-engineer.com and you can check out the 2024 training schedule. And really excited that very shortly we will be releasing our first audio-only course on the art of elicitation, information elicitation. That was written by Dr. Abby Morano and myself. So really excited to have that out there and looking forward to seeing what you think about it once it's released so you can get more information on the website about that. If you like the topic of social engineering, please feel free to hop on over to our Slack channel. If you can't find it in the show notes, just ping me on LinkedIn and I'll get you the link to it. But we have over 1,500 people in there now every day talking about all aspects of social engineering. And if a family-friendly legal chat sounds like something you're interested in, then come on over and join us there. We've had a job board where 10 people have found different employment because of coming on over to there and posting that they're looking for work. So if you need work, you're looking for work, you just want to talk about all aspects of social engineering, come on over to our channel and we'll be able to get you hooked up. Okay, what else do we got going on? I want to invite everyone to take a moment to go to innocentlivesfoundation.org. If you're not familiar with us, our mission over there is to help law enforcement agencies around the globe track and geolocate people who traffic children and create child abuse material. And I'm really proud of the team. 6 years we've been going. We just had our first initial inaugural gala out in LA with LeVar Burton. Pretty awesome time. So hopefully you guys can go and check out the website. We'll have some pictures and other things up there. And if you want to support us, you can do so either through donations or you can volunteer your time if that's something that you would like to do. But you can get all information at innocentlivesfoundation.org. If you love the music here at the podcast, then go over and check pro-rock.com. That is none other than Clutch, the best rock and roll band on earth. Neil Fallon helped me start the ILF, and they're big supporters of what we do over there. So we love them even more because of that. But you can go check them out. And last but not least, if you have any topic ideas or guest suggestions, drop them in the comments. Give us a like and a thumbs up. Those things help us to expand the horizons of this podcast, and your suggestions are always really, really good. Okay, now let me introduce our guest for today, Ryan McBeth. So Ryan is a software architect, novelist, triathlete, and YouTuber. He makes videos on YouTube about programming, cybersecurity, and one of our favorite topics, OSINT. He spent 20 years as an anti-armor and heavy weapons infantryman with 2 overseas deployments. He also spent time performing the C4 ISR intelligence collection for various government customers and currently consults on intelligence collection and analysis methods. So you can imagine we're going to have some pretty awesome conversation. Ryan, thanks for coming on the show today.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me, Chris. I love talking about this stuff. I really appreciate the invite.
You know, it's for us. We don't get a lot of people who come on the show that have been in OSINT in government settings. Like you guys would, we do OSINT and there's not really a risk of any of us dying or people dying if we fail. So when you're talking about military grade OSINT, give me a little background on that. How did you end up there? How was that your career path?
Oh, boy, I ended up. So I got out of the military, and I was hired by a company called Accenture Federal Services, and basically the specific division I was in, the C4 ISR division. We used command control, communications, computers, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance to find bad guys. And once we find those bad guys, we can hand that information over to our client, and our client might continue surveillance, or they might use more kinetic means to teach the target, to service the target. So I got into it just because I was a software engineer, and they needed somebody who had a bit of a military background. One of our sensors, I'll give you a good example of this. One of our sensors was an acoustic sensor. It listened for enemy rifle fire or even enemy mortars that were being shot from far away. You could actually hear the thump of that mortar being fired. And there were 4 of these systems that came in a package. And there was some debate on our team, like, if you're doing backlog grooming as a software engineer, like, hey, how do we integrate this piece of software in with our system software? And there was this one idea floated like, hey, if one of these systems goes down, we're going to show a yellow light because it's 75% up. So it's yellow, right? Oh, heck no. I was an infantryman. If 4 of these things are at each corner of your forward operating base and one of them goes down, now you have a sector that isn't covered. Man, that's red. That's red. And we got to let everybody know it's red. We got to get another force out there to maybe watch that area. We got to get a repair crew out there immediately while that force is securing that area so they can get that system up. So I think that is one of those things that an infantryman kind of knows, that the average computer programmer who might never have been tired or cold or trying to use a piece of software with gloves and the buttons are too small doesn't really think of.
Yeah.
So I think I certainly brought something to the equation there.
That's an interesting thought process, right? Because I could see the logic and, well, 75% is good. So that's not a bad ratio. I mean, if I had 75% success, I'd be like, that's good job, Chris. But in your use case, yeah, that's a whole sector now that could lead to somebody dying or many people. So
absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about like the state of the world today, right? Like it seems like OSINT is something that we should be teaching our kids in school right now, because you go on social media and it's just nonstop propaganda, nonstop, you don't know what's real, what's not. Pictures are posted of things and events that you find out later on were all fake. And, we see like every nation state using propaganda against other nation states. We hear a lot about the Russian propaganda happening. They even openly admit how they use Facebook and doing things like that. How can an average everyday person know like what to do when they're on the internet and stay safe from all of that?
Well, a good rule of thumb is that if it activates an emotional part of you, you should probably stop and think. If there is a visceral emotional reaction when you click on a link or you read a story or you read a tweet, you should probably stop and think before sharing that or replying back, because some of this stuff is engineered to get a reaction. And from what I understand, we say bot, but bot makes you think of a robot, AI. Yeah, some of the stuff is like that, but a lot of these bots are really paid. They're paid by an organization to put out a certain number of tweets an hour, a certain number of posts an hour, and yet they're doing this for 8 to 12 hours a day. It must be exhausting, to have to come up with 144 original thoughts every single day that make people mad. I can only imagine what it's like getting home from work.
I can't. No.
Yeah. So that would be step number one. One option is just to get off of social media. That's kind of tough to do, right? Because you want to see pictures of your nephews. You want to see pictures of your dogs. You want to spend, you just worked all day. It'd be nice to flop down on the couch and just scroll through Instagram and, oh, look at that. That's a funny thing.
Yeah.
But embedded in that is danger. It's stuff that wants to influence the way you think. And, when you think about it, propaganda is everywhere. There's basically 2 types of propaganda. There's misinformation, disinformation, which is put out by a state. And then there's branding. And, when you think about it, like these Post-it notes that I have in my hand right here, it's manufactured by Post-it, right? Mm-hmm. So when I buy a Post-it note, I know that I'm going to be able to write on that surface. I know that I'm going to be able to peel it off easily. I'm going to be able to stick it on something. It's going to work. So what is a brand but a contract of quality between the manufacturer and the consumer to let you know, like, hey, this is a thing you should buy. When I buy Post-it, I know I'm going to get this thing, right? So branding is one kind of propaganda, and we consume that all the time. But misinformation, disinformation, that's something that then is kind of new to us, because for the longest time, our information sources came from essentially 3 places: television, the newspaper, and radio. And they were slow to get this information out. There was more time to digest this information. And you were exposed to a limited amount of it. I guess in 91, when CNN covered the Gulf War, then you got that flood of 24-hour news information, right? So I think kind of we're just not inoculated against the kind of 24/7 disinformation that we can see in between seeing ads for Post-it notes.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a concern.
You gave so much there. I want to back up to your advice, first of all, because this is so, it's so wonderfully close to home. Like when we talk about social engineering attacks and we are educating customers, the advice you gave, and I love it because we didn't even talk about this beforehand, but the advice you gave is the exact advice that we give all the time, is malicious social engineers are trying to trigger an emotional response from you that will get you to click the link or say the password or do something out of either fear or some other type of strong emotion. So we always tell people, when you're interacting with a voice or an email and you start to feel that strong emotion, that's a great time to take a step back and, whoa, why am I feeling such a strong emotion about this message here? And the design of the attack is to make people take the action without that critical thought. So I loved your piece of advice. Like, it's just that is great. And yeah, I know in a perfect world, I would love it if I can get off social media. I know I'd be happier, but it's never going to happen, right? I mean, it's how we market our business. It's how we promote what we do. It's how we talk about what's coming up. Social media. I mean, I don't know the last time I read an ad in a newspaper. I really don't. I don't know the last time I read an ad in a magazine.
Yeah, I'm really trying to think. I can't think of I picked up a newspaper a couple of weeks ago, like because someone left it in their lobby in my building. Yeah,
that's exactly. I was at a hotel and on the table was a newspaper and I picked it up and I read it, but I didn't look at one ad. I just read a couple of the cover stories and that's it.
Yeah, now that I think of it, I read a USA Today when I was in California. I didn't know they still had USA Today, and it was at my door. I'm like, oh my God, they still do this?
Right? Yeah, right. They still print this stuff? What?
In the 90s, when you stayed at a hotel, you wake up in the morning, there's USA Today
all the time, right at your door. Yep.
I thought, this is what the am I in 1995? What the heck is this?
Yeah,
USA Today.
And then here's what's interesting about your second point. I love this. I never thought about branding as being part of propaganda. Because I always look at propaganda as a negative, but branding can also be a positive. Like in your example of Post-it notes, when you were saying that, I was in the grocery store just the other day and there was a product with a brand name, one that I've used a million times. And then right next to it, a product that said, the Publix brand of this. And I looked at the ingredients and they were identical. Yeah. And I still bought the one that was $1.50 more because I knew that if I bought that one, it was going to taste the way I needed it to taste and I wanted it to taste and it was going to have exactly the thing. And I was unsure about the lesser one because I've never used it. So I went with the brand and spent more money.
So branding, when I say branding is propaganda, you take a look at Ukraine. Now, back a year and a half ago, roughly, Ukraine actually tried to do some of the disinformation. They tried to do that with the Ghost of Kyiv. I don't know if you're familiar with the Ghost of Kyiv.
No.
But so back during the initial invasion, there was this myth that I shouldn't say a myth, a legend, because the guy really did exist. But a Ukrainian pilot in a MiG-29 shot down 6 Russian fighters in one sortie, supposedly. The sortie is an air mission. Mm-hmm. So I heard that. I'm like, MiG-29, that's got 6 hard points, meaning 6 weapon launching racks. It's got 6 hard points. It's got a cannon. To become an ace in a day, I don't know if we've seen that since maybe World War II, World War I. I'd have to look that one up. That's some Albert Ball kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then this legend grew and people started distributing videos showing a dogfight. And the dogfight was pulled from this video game called DCS, Digital Combat Simulator. And it's a very high fidelity simulator. But a lot of people say, it looks like DCS.
Huh.
And I think all of the nations of Europe went over to Ukraine and said, you do this, you go down this path, and you're not getting any aid. And so what Ukraine did was they founded a company called United 24. And United 24 is essentially Ukraine's brand. It's their branding agency. And when you think about it, when I think of a Coca-Cola, I think of America and hot dogs and barbecues is what I'm going to drink at McDonald's. So United 24 took a look at themselves and they said, all right, what is Ukraine's brand? Ukraine's brand is heroism. That's Ukraine's brand. So instead of seeing misinformation or disinformation come out of Ukraine, what we're seeing is branding. And what is Ukraine's brand? Ukraine's brand is heroism.
Yeah.
Look at these soldiers. Look how brave they are. Look at them fighting.
Yeah.
Here's a soldier with a cat. Here's a really attractive Ukrainian soldier with a rifle.
Right.
No, it's an airsoft rifle. She's nowhere near the front lines, but
yeah,
I've seen female Ukrainian medics. They don't look like that.
Yeah.
Right? But that's kind of what United 24 did is brilliant because they created a brand. And people want to believe in that brand. And now they're on Team Ukraine as opposed to Team Russia because of the branding of heroism.
So I imagine Russia's doing the same thing. So how is Russia applying? I mean, because they don't care about misinformation or disinformation, right? So how are they applying the propaganda wheel?
They do put out misinformation, disinformation. I've seen. I have fans of mine in Russia, and they'll send me pictures. You do see a lot of propaganda posters on walls or on streets, at bus stops. One thing I found very interesting was I found there were pictures of women in the Ratnik combat uniform. And Russia has women serving in their military, but they're mainly cooks and nurses. And oftentimes when a woman is married to a soldier, she'll join the military as well, and she'll become a steward at the base chow hall, right? She'll become a cook at the base chow hall or whatever. So I thought it was interesting that Russia was trying to get women to enlist, especially since they don't tend to do the same jobs that American women do, or even women in NATO. You do tend to see pictures of Russia giving out HA, or at least you saw that at the beginning of the war, giving out humanitarian assistance, HA, to people in Donetsk and Luhansk. One of Russia's main points is showing that, hey, we're actually liberating the Russian-speaking peoples of Donetsk and Luhansk, who have been not permitted to speak their native tongue by the Ukrainian government, which is not necessarily true, but it's something they want people to think. You've also seen, regarding propaganda, a lot of talk about Nazis, which it resonates with Russians. Doesn't really work well with Westerners, and that's because when Westerners think of Nazis, Westerners think of the Holocaust.
Yeah.
Westerners think of the Nazis rounding up Jews and gypsies and homosexuals and sending them to camps. Yeah. Russia never really had that. They had some of that, but not at the scale of Poland or Germany or Austria. Not at the same scale. So to a Russian, a Nazi is a fascist who wants to destroy their country. So that's kind of how the Russian Nazi thing never really worked in the West. Because we go, wait, but Vladimir Zelensky's Jewish. How can there be Nazis in Ukraine? That doesn't make any sense. But to Russia, when they say Nazi, they're thinking of a totally different thing. They're thinking of people who want to destroy them as a nation. And if you're going with this lie of, hey, there are Ukrainian-speaking Russians who are being denied their heritage and culture, we need to go in and save them, then you go with the Nazis. These Ukrainians, they're Nazis. They want to destroy the Russian-speaking peoples of Donetsk and Luhansk. So that's kind of how they move with their propaganda. Is
the propaganda, the use of propaganda, I would imagine it's been used in war since war has been around, I would imagine. But is the use of it now so much more prolific in war because of social media and the way we use social media across the world?
That's a good question. I think it's different. I mean, if you want to talk about, I had talked about this before, that one of the first use cases of propaganda in the modern era was the Lusitania. When the Lusitania was a British passenger ship that was sunk by a German submarine during World War II. Before then, there used to be literally prize rules, which was, hey, the submarine would pull up to the merchant. They say, listen, we're going to board you. We're going to search you. If we find any munitions on your ship, we're going to put everybody in lifeboats and we're going to scuttle your ship, or we're going to take it as a prize. And then Germany said, you know what? We're doing unrestricted submarine warfare, meaning any ship flying a British flag can be sunk at any time. And we're not going to give you any warning. It was considered very unsporting at the time. But also, you know, you're on a submarine. How many people can you take aboard? Right? If they don't have enough lifeboats, right? So the Lusitania was sank. I think there were 200 or so Americans that were on that ship, including, I think, a wealthy man. I think a Vanderbilt was on that ship as well. I might be wrong about that, but there was one wealthy man. And that made a lot of people mad. And you can see recruitment posters for the U.S. Navy by 1917 showing a sinking ship with Lady Liberty holding a sword up, you know, in front of the ship saying, you know, people are drowning in the ocean saying, will you let this stand? So I think it was there. I just think that it was there on recruiting posters, on stamps. I would not be surprised if this stuff was in movie theaters when you went to movie theaters. So the propaganda was around. But I think now we're getting our propaganda mixed in with our entertainment.
Oh, yeah.
And that might be a little bit different because you're already primed to be enjoying this entertainment. And when you swipe to the next video, now you're getting something where you go, wow, there are Nazis in Ukraine now. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So, you know, and now that idea is germinating in your head. What are we doing in Ukraine? They're a bunch of Nazis.
Yeah. That's interesting. When we saw a lot of the riots and stuff happening here in the States, we kind of stopped it because it got really negative. But we started to do a test here. I had like 2 burner phones that I never connected to anything. Right. And I put Instagram, an account that I just made up, Instagram on both of them. And on one, I typed in, police killing black man. And then on the other one, I put police helping others. And it was amazing how just that one search, and now everything in my social media bubble was forced into one small funnel of whatever that first search was. And you saw no good news in the one phone that was a police officer killing someone. And you saw none of that negative news in the other one. And I was like, whoa, like this is like, I did one search. That's it. And then just because I did swipe and like or look at an image, it just said, oh, well, he wants that. So we're going to keep feeding that. And I was like, this is the danger of like, you're in a silo that you don't see outside to any other viewpoint they need
to make money.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, these companies, you know, if you're not paying for a product, then the product is you. Right. Yeah. So these companies, they need to sell you, stuff. They need to sell you lipstick. They need to sell you soda. They need to sell you cars. So what's going to get you sticking for as long as possible? Yeah. Right. And they're going to do whatever it takes to kind of keep you on that platform. I think that's one of the reasons why I can detect bots with Cyabra software. I can detect inauthentic accounts, but Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, they're never going to remove those accounts because it keeps people engaged. Right. It keeps people going, I'm going to comment on that guy who said that thing. Because people change their minds after reading a comment on the internet all the time.
Yeah, of course, right.
I'm going to do that thing. I'm going to have my say. But it's just kept someone engaged. Yeah. And that's a very powerful hook, when you believe that you have agency and you can comment on something. I'm going to show him. I'm going to own the libs. I'm going to dunk on the Republicans. Yeah. It is a very powerful motivator.
That's an interesting. Yeah, it's an interesting thought. You being the product. That's an interesting way to think about social media. Maybe if that messaging got across to people more, it would create that need for critical thought, because like what you're saying makes perfect sense. And when you look at yourself as, I'm the product, that means that they're going to have to get me to do something or keep doing something so they keep making money. Otherwise, what's their purpose, right? Because we don't pay for any of those applications. Everything's free. So they have to keep feeding you ads, right?
I mean, there's a cost to free.
Yeah, right.
There's definitely a cost to free. Now, typically, I don't mind getting ads that are targeted toward me because, yes, I would like to try a different kind of whiskey.
Yeah.
Or maybe I do want this new kind of car. It would be nice to. That sounds like a great deal on a flight to Orlando.
Yeah.
But you're not going to see me buying pet food. Right? A pet food ad isn't really going to work for me. So in some ways, like I don't really mind this world where social media companies know what I want, because I would like to be given ads for things that I want. It's an interesting way to think about it, because I was saying something similar to someone the other day. Is I was having a real hard time finding a flight where some business flights, and it just seemed like anytime you put business class into a search, it just went through the roof. Yeah. And I was searching, and then I got this ad on, I think it was on Instagram, and it was discounted business class flights, and you have an agent that searches the internet. So I'm like, what the heck, I'll try, right? And I get a hold of this person, and sure enough, man, they're able to book flights at rates that I couldn't find anywhere else. And I'm like, yeah, I wouldn't have found that. So I'm okay with getting that ad. That ad saved me some money. I always fly what I call Southwest first class.
Yes.
I mean, I get Southwest, I get in the A roster, and I make a beeline toward the exit row where I get
leg room and everything. Yep. Yeah. Sadly, Southwest doesn't go international. So, but I'm with you. I do the same thing with Southwest. I love that. Yep. Just give me some leg room. I'm 6'3". That's all I need is some leg room, and I'm happy. Right. But I'm always the guy who gets someone right next to me, and it's that last seat because I'm wider in the shoulder. So no one wants to sit there, but then it's always that poor guy who's like the same size as me that has to sit right there in the middle. But yeah, that's great. So, when in our previous, talking about some topics here, you made a comment about the fifth domain of warfare, cyber and information.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that a little bit, but I'm just curious, When did that start coming about? When did that become the fifth domain?
Boy, that's actually a pretty good question. I would probably say I've never really thought about that, but I would probably say in 2008.
Okay.
And that would be when President Obama was running for office in 2008, right? Yeah. He was running for office in 2008, George W. Bush. And, one of the things that President Obama did well was he kind of was a little more tech savvy. And I think a lot of his canvassers were a little more tech savvy. And they were able to use information collected from public databases to determine where to canvass. All right, we're only going to canvass in this neighborhood because these people are more likely to vote for us. Now, I'm a gun owner. And back in 2008 or 2007, I remember hearing all this. Oh my God, if Obama gets elected, he's going to take our guns. He's going to do this. He's going to do that. And you saw that back then mainly on gun forums. And not everybody is on that. So I think 2008 was the first time when people started using data to figure out where to canvass, and also where people who had a vested interest in making sure that President Obama did not get elected started to say, hey, we need to be really wary of this guy. So I want to say 2008 was probably when that first started. Mm-hmm. And social media, we had social media in 2008, MySpace. I think Facebook was still in development. Yeah. I think Facebook was still a college app, a college only program. I think there was Foursquare. I don't remember when Twitter was founded, but it might have been around that time.
Yeah, when?
It was around that time.
I am trying to think when that was started.
It is weird because those technologies have been with us for so long. It is hard to remember life without them.
Yeah.
In fact, like I use Twitter when I live in DC. I let me see if there's any delays on Metro. Or, when I'm down in Virginia Beach, if I want to take the train up to DC, I take a look at Twitter to make sure the trains are on time, because Amtrak has their own account for the Northeast Corridor. Right? So it can be a useful tool there. But the warfare element, what started out with sending out misinformation has now reached a level where you're actually doing battlefield shaping, shaping the battlefield.
That's interesting.
And when you shape the battlefield, what that really means is you're setting up the conditions for victory. So a shaping operation might be a good example is during the first Gulf War, Operation Desert Storm, the coalition did a 6-week airstrike against Iraqi defenses. For 6 weeks, they just pounded Iraqi defenses. Well, there was essentially no anti-air left. And after that, then they started going after individual tanks, individual Scud launchers. And so when the coalition finally went on the ground, it took 100 hours for Iraq to capitulate. So that was a shaping operation. So the shaping operation that Russia is trying to perform right now is they're trying to shape the information domain to make the American public believe that they are not getting their dollar value from their government because too much money is going to Ukraine. And that shapes the battlefield by creating a public opinion against the government for distributing money or aid or weapons or equipment to Ukraine. And Russia's been very effective with this. You slowly see support for Ukraine ticking down in the public sector. And then when you start getting misinformed people going on, a good example, Joe Rogan. You go on the Joe Rogan podcast, one thing he keeps talking about is $700 to Hawaii. So there was a wildfire in Hawaii.
Yep.
And after any disaster, FEMA is authorized to give up to $700 to people immediately. Like just take care of sundries, get new clothes. You can spend that on whatever you want. You need new clothes, you get a hotel room, whatever. You know how to spend this money better than us. Here's $700. Now that $700 one-time payment became the government is only given $700 to Hawaiians. When really it's a one-time payment to get you through the next couple of days until they can get you into a room, fill out this application, see what kind of aid is available. But when you get something that powerful, well, how can we give $10 billion to Ukraine, but we can't give people in Hawaii more than $700? Because people in Hawaii need a HIMARS system, right? I don't think you can shoot Patriots at the fire. Right? Patriot missile system isn't going to help you rebuild. But it's a fun thing to say, and you don't have to think a lot. You can just say $700. It's easy to remember. $700 to Ukraine. $700 to Hawaii. Well, they're only giving people $700, right? Yeah. So Russia is shaping the battlefield with that message. And that is something we've never seen before. I'm one of the things I actually advocate for, and I'm giving a speech at the Texas Cyber Conference, is that I believe that people who engage in information warfare should be considered combatants. Look, if you work at an ammunition factory and you're a civilian and you're building ammunition, if you go home for the night, are you a target? No. But while you're working at that ammunition factory, are you a lawful target? Absolutely. You're a lawful target. So if you're engaging in information warfare and shaping the battlefield, information warfare, perhaps you should be subject to either cyber or kinetic actions. Food for thought, because we're still fighting wars the same way we fought in World War II. We may need to consider people who are publishing disinformation as part of a government plan to be state actors engaged in shaping operations.
What you brought up about the Russian, the information warfare is really fascinating because, of course, you can't live in this country without hearing both sides, people complaining about the amount of money going to Ukraine and comparing it to Maui and knowing now that was basically a Russian job here. It's a little scary to think about how well that worked on so many people and is still working on so many people and getting people so angry. And I hate to even say it, but a genius move on their part to play it out that way, because what creates the disunity and the difficulty for a government to move forward is when you have your citizens, especially in a country that's not an authoritarian or they're democratic country. with a democracy, you have the people, you need the people's support to do those things. So taking away their support wipes the feet out.
One thing that made it very unique was the fact that it's Hawaii. And how many people know someone who lives in Hawaii? And how many people are going to get on a plane and go to Hawaii and check for themselves? They might not have been able to do this in North Carolina, right? If the hurricane hit North Carolina, there would be news crews there. But now, if you're a news organization and you're like, man, I got to send someone to Hawaii, I'm just going to rely on the local affiliates. I'm not paying $15,000 to get a news crew over to Hawaii with all their equipment for what? I'll just ask the local people. That'll be a news story for 2 nights.
Yep.
And then it's done. I would love to go to Maui and hook up with the National Guard and see what's actually going on the ground there. But there's no hotels in Maui right now because everyone's staying in them. What am I going to do? Right. I might be able to stay with the National Guard if they let me do that. But again, that's actually a calculation as well. If I spend $5,000 of my own money flying to Hawaii to report the story, I'm never going to see that again. I'm not getting that back making a YouTube video where I make $500. Right. Like that's a tough equation to do. Right?
It's an interesting thought process, right? And I think, so far you've given us a lot to really think about. And hopefully when people hear this episode, one of the things I would hope to get out of it, like what I'm getting out of it, a little more critical thought when we see something on social media. A little more critical thought, not just quickly and blindly believing a story because it sounds like it could be legitimate, but trying to really okay, I need to think through this because it's not.
One of the biggest issues that we see now is DIP, or Deceptive Information Persuasion. And that's where someone will take a quote and put it on a picture that's out of context, or just show a picture out of context and say, look at this. Look at that. There was one I did a couple of days ago where someone, they implied that there was a dog clinging on to this tree branch, in a raging river. And it was during the California typhoon that hit California. And it said, check on your pets. No, this actually came from an event in the Philippines 2 years ago.
Wow.
So that's one of those things where there was no maliciousness to it, right? It's just someone wants attention, or someone wants clicks, or someone wants cred, right? Someone wants subscribers. So I'm gonna take this picture of a dog. I'm gonna say it's California. I'm gonna say, hey, check on your pets. And now everybody thinks, well, because it makes sense, right? You know that there's a hurricane or a typhoon in California. You know there are dogs in California. Here is a dog looking sad. Who isn't going to stop and look at a dog that's in danger?
Yeah.
Feel for that dog, right? So there's that emotional response right there. And that's an innocent way of showing deceptive information persuasion. But you could easily show a picture of President Biden and a quote that is taken out of context, but it sounds, oh, wow, Biden probably would say that. I'm going to retweet that because, wow, it's a quote. It has his picture. It's so easy to do. It's almost trivial. And since people want to believe, it is a very powerful emotion, especially if you're on some one specific part of the political spectrum. And kind of the objective there is to saturate the feed with all of this misinformation. So you think, well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong for supporting President Trump. What? Look at all this stuff about Biden. Everybody else seems to believe that this guy is bad. Maybe I'm the bad guy.
Yeah.
So nobody wants to be uninvited to the party, right? Everyone wants to be on the team that wins. So if you can saturate political discourse, especially with one certain viewpoint, there might be people who don't want to stand up and say, hey, you know what? I think you're wrong. I think this is a bunch of BS. So I don't know how to fix that other than maybe charging to post, but then that would destroy.
That would destroy it. No, they'll never do it. I was giving a speech at a university once, and just for fun at the end, I put a picture of Abraham Lincoln, and in quotes I put, "Don't believe everything you read on the internet." And
that's deceptive information.
Right?
Right?
And I had somebody actually ask, did he really say that? And I'm like, I thought he was like pranking me. And I'm like, you're not serious, right? And he's like, no, like it's a quote. I never read that before. And I'm like, dude, the internet wasn't around when Abraham Lincoln was on Earth.
No.
No, he did not. He did not actually say that. That was supposed to be humorous, but yeah, when you said that, I'm like, yeah, okay, that's interesting.
Well, there is a famous one with Betty White. Now, this is a family program. I'm not going to say what the quote was, but if you Google, Betty White quotes, there was this famous quote about her. And she did not say that thing, but people still believe it.
Wow.
You want to believe that Betty White said this because she seems like a feisty woman who would say this, and she actually didn't. Wow. But it's fun to believe.
Yeah. And like your example with the dog, it's harmless because all that would make me do is want to go check on my dog. Yeah. But, when they use it maliciously to maybe.
My fear with California is if California had been hit harder, it would have been one of the things you would have seen was I was afraid of Twitter accounts that were pretending to represent the government.
Right.
And saying like, hey, go to this place for aid. And then there's no aid there. And then people are angry. And, then that's when the local news shows up. There was no aid here. And we said to come here for aid. And the California government isn't getting aid out to people correctly. Yeah. So you just manufactured a situation, right? It's so easy to do. That was one problem. The other problem would have been, again, misinformation regarding, people in California aren't getting aid because we're sending too much aid to Ukraine. Yep. Yeah, and so on. So California. I'm actually surprised that if California was hit worse, we probably would have seen more of that.
All right, let me ask you a couple questions as we close. Most of us, I know for me, wouldn't be where I am right now without some mentors in my life. Mm-hmm. So do you have someone that, when you think of, boy, I wouldn't be sitting here today if it wasn't for this particular person or persons?
It's my dad.
Your dad.
My dad, I didn't grow up with a lot of money. My dad was a warehouse manager, managed a company that managed the warehouse of a company that sold women's dresses. Some of my first memories were on the weekends. My dad actually got in trouble with the Teamsters because he would deliver dresses to stores in his van. If there was a store that needed dresses and they were out of stock, he would come in on the Saturday and he would get the dresses from the warehouse and then drive out to the store and hand deliver the dresses to the store. That's a whole story. I actually engaged with the Philadelphia mob and was held hostage for
wow.
Yeah, I wasn't held hostage. So the Teamsters, Nicky Scarfo, head of the Philadelphia mob, they caught my dad doing this, and my dad told me, "Hey, do you want to ride in a truck, like an 18-wheeler?" Heck yeah, I'm like 7 years old. It's 1981. I'm like, heck yeah, I want to ride in a truck. And so I guess the Teamster drove me around the truck for an hour while my dad had a conversation. I'm sure they wouldn't have hurt me. And I think it was more like we can reach out and touch you anytime we want.
You're right.
They never actually murder you. It never gets to that point. All the Teamsters call out sick or a truck catches on fire. Uh-huh. It never gets to the point where they have to kill you or your family. That story, I haven't told that story in a while. But my dad, he knew that I liked computers. And, when I was in school, I was in wood shop. They really wanted me to become a carpenter. That's what you did when you're poor Irish. You became a carpenter, electrician, plumber. I still have all my tools, too. I am a fair carpenter. But it was my dad that bought me a programming book in an IBM language called BASIC.
Yeah.
And it was with that book that I would go to computer club. I had a teacher that allowed me to go to the computer club even when she wasn't managing it, and work with computers and learn programming. So if it wasn't for my dad, I'd probably be swinging a hammer somewhere.
That's cool. That's a great story. Yeah. Now, well, I'm going to ask you about your favorite book, but it doesn't have to be about the topic we spoke about. It could be any book, any topic that you like. We just like to get a recommendation from our guests.
You know what? I mean, I could talk about fiction books all day, but if there's one book that's probably my favorite book, it's called A Field Guide to Understanding Human Error by Sidney Dekker. Sidney Dekker is this Australian guy. He mainly investigates plane crashes. But one of the things you take away when you read this book is that you realize that there is no such thing as human error. It's easy to say, oh, well, that was human error. But nobody comes into work that day going, I want to crash this plane, right? Nobody says, like, you know what? I want to come into work today. I want to drop the production database. I want to be working Saturday. You know, nobody does it. And if they do that, they're a sociopath. There's ways of dealing with those people. But you have to start by saying, you know what? There's no such thing as human error. Nobody comes to work wanting to do a bad job. So maybe human error, what we call human error, is really a result of focus of attention for competing priorities. So there's an airline pilot that crashes trying to land. Were there other factors involved? Did the plane have some device that was constantly beeping? Or you look at something like 3 Mile Island. Oh, that was human error. 3 Mile Island was human error. Well, there was a gauge that wasn't working. And everybody assumed, well, that gauge has never worked, so we're just not going to count on that gauge. We're not going to send anybody down to look at the gauge that's actually on that pipe. But nobody at 3 Mile Island went into work that day going, I want to blow up this reactor.
Yeah.
Right? So whenever someone commits a human error, we always go, we punish them. We focus, I'm going to punish that person. Well, maybe we need to look at the factors that contributed to those errors. And I've always been a big fan of using that when it comes to the military. How did we get to the point where we committed this error? What were the competing priorities? What were the different focuses of attention? What were the ergonomic factors involved when this error occurred? Did this vehicle roll over because it's a bad vehicle design? Was it human error because the guy was going too fast? Or did we make people drive when they haven't had any sleep for 20 hours? Right?
Yeah.
So Sidney Dekker, A Field Guide to Understanding.
I put it in the show notes. That's great. Thank you for that wonderful recommendation. And I have all of the ways that people can reach out to you from your YouTube channel, Instagram, Twitter. We'll put all that in your website. So if you're interested in finding out more about Ryan and the work he's doing and maybe where he's speaking, he mentioned Texas, that you can get all that information there. Thanks for coming on the show today. This was really a really interesting chat. I just looked at the time. I usually tell people, I won't keep you longer than 40 minutes. But it was so fascinating. I just lost track of time.
We can keep going.
Keep going? Oh, man, I would. But, I've been told that I when I make podcasts longer than an hour, people get upset. I don't know why. I know.
Got it.
But you know what? Here's what happens. We have great guests, and then I say, you got to come back, and we can have another conversation, and that keeps people wanting to hear more.
Absolutely, Chris. Yeah. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Not a problem. Thank you. This was really great. And thank you all for joining us this month. Come back next month where we'll have Laura Castleman, CEO and author. We'll be talking to her about another fascinating topic. Till then, stay safe. See you.